A good chodesh, l'chaim v'levracha, a good morgen, a good nachmittag, a good avond, wherever you're listening from. Welcome, and thank you very much, Rabbi Levitov. Thank you very much, Rabbi Naparstik. The famous story, I read the story in Sipurei Chassidim by Hagon Reb Shlomo Yosef Zevin, Zechrona Levracha, the editor of Encyclopedia Talmudis, and many other svarim, and he has a few volumes, I think 2 volumes of Sipurei Chassidim. And he tells a story there that Reb Mendel of Haradaka, Reb Menachem Mendel of Haradak, or some known as Reb Mendel of Vitebsker, he came from Vitebsk. He was, of course, one of the oldest students of the Mezritcher Maggid. And after the passing of the Maggid in Tovkuf Lamed Gimel Yutas Kislev, 1772, it's known that the Alter Rebbe was lekabel Reb Mendele as his Rebbe. It's interesting that once on Simchas Torah, I remember before Hakafis at the Fabrengen, the Rebbe asked why Reb Mendele Haradoker doesn't go into the list of the Rabbeim, the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, and Reb Mendele Haradoker. The Rebbe gave a long answer then, but just the question itself was fascinating. He wrote a sefer called Pri Haaretz. Pri Haaretz, Chassidus. So Rav Zevin, Reb Shlomo Yosef Zevin tells a story that once he made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, I think Tovkuf Lamed Zayin, a few years after the Petir of the Maggid. And the Alter Rebbe wanted to go with him to Eretz Yisrael, but Reb Mendele felt that that would be the wrong thing because the Alter Rebbe should remain in Belarus, what was called White Russia, the area of Russia, White Russia, Lithuania, Lyozhne, and then later Liadi, and become the leader of the Hasidic movement there. So the Alter Rebbe stayed behind. The stories are well known. So Reb Mendel of Vitebsk moved to Tveria, Tiberias, and that's where he's buried, in the old Beis HaChaim of Tveria. Maybe some of you were there. So Rav Zevin tells an interesting story that there was once a Jew. Apparently he was an imbecile. He had challenges. And he went up to the Har HaZeisim with a shofar, and he started to blow shofar. And I guess he knew what he's doing. So the sound resonated, the sound carried far and far. And suddenly somebody in the Har HaZeisim is blowing shofar. So rumor had it, Eliyahu Hanavi is here. It's the pnei of lekabel shofar gadol. L'cheir is saying, Eliyahu Hanavi is announcing and heralding the coming of Moshiach. Hineni shalech lechem es Eliyahu Hanavi. So it's a big commotion. Eliyahu Hanavi, there's a shit in Gemara in Erevin and Gimel. Eliyahu Hanavi is going to come before Moshiach. What's going to happen in the next day, the next few days? And Rav Zevin says the story circulated very fast. So before the WhatsApp era, but I guess stories could still circulate. And the news arrived in Tveria. And somebody went into the Heliker, Reb Mendel of Vitebsk, Reb Mendel of Haradoker, Reb Menachem Mendel of Haradak, and he told him that Moshiach is here. And he told him the story. So Reb Mendel of Haradoker went over to his window. He opened the window. He stretched out his head, and he gave a smell. He gave a sniff, and he said, "Leide, leide, noch nicht." Unfortunately, not yet. So Chassidim asked the question, why did he have to open his window and smell outside the house? He could have smelled inside the house. The answer is, well, in the shtub for the Mendel Haradoker is Alam al Geven, the Ruach for Moshiach. In the house of a Mendel Haradoker, there was always an ambiance of Geula, a consciousness of Geula. So smelling in his house wouldn't do the job. He had to see what's happening outside of his house. It's similar maybe to what is brought in the Sefer Pelech Harimin from Reb Hillel Paritcher, who says in the name of Reb Zalman Zezmer, who was his Rebbe, one of his teachers, who said in the name of the Alter Rebbe, that Lefnei Neshamas, the Rebbe used to quote this often, Lefnei Neshamas Hagvoyes K'may Reb Shimon ben Yochai Le'nechrav Habayis Klal. Certain Neshamas who didn't experience the Churban, not that they didn't experience the Churban, they knew about the Churban, they also fasted on Tisha B'Av. But it means their Their state of mind, their inner consciousness was in a state of geula. It's one story. Now there's another story. This is an anecdotal story. You'll see why I'm sharing these stories. This is a funny story. It's a good Yiddish amaisa, but it captures, like all these anecdotal stories and jokes, they capture sometimes profound truths. There was once a fox, and the fox was very hungry for lunch, and the fox didn't have a meal. And the fox saw on top of the tree, beautiful, beautiful big bird. The fox thought to itself, this bird can be a geschmacke lunch, but how do you get the bird down? The fox will start climbing the tree. The bird will fly away. Foxes can't fly. They're smart, but they can't fly. So the fox tells the bird, did you hear what's going on? It's the time of Moshiach. It's a time of Geula. Time of Geula, it says, we just read Achron Shal Pesach, V'gar Zeivim Keves. The wolf shall lie with the lamb. It's a time of peace. No animals are killing each other anymore. They're not destroying each other anymore. So why don't you come down from the tree and we could schmooze and we could verbring and we can hang out and we can have a wonderful time. And the poor bird was gullible. So the bird started to make its way down from the tree right into the mouth of the fox. At that moment, there was a hunter who came into the forest, to the wilderness, to the jungle to hunt. And as the system with the hunters is, they send out the dogs who right away sense what is going on, the animals that are available, and the dogs bark. So as the fox smells or sees or hears the dogs, the fox lifts up its feet, ready to run to escape the wrath and the arrows or the bullets of the hunter. So the bird turns to the fox and says, where are you running? He says, the dogs are coming after me. The dogs are going to kill me. The hunter's going to shoot me. I have to get out of here. The bird says, I don't understand. You told me that this is the era of Moshiach. All the animals are going to live in peace. Man and animal will live in peace. Moshiach is here. The fox looks up. I have to say this in Yiddish and then I'll translate. The fox says, yeah, but the problem is, as the hint, glauben ist to Moshiach. The problem is that the dogs don't believe in Moshiach. Now, both of these stories, the first is obviously a different level of a story. The story and the Milsa de B'dichas, I should say, really, I think, convey a very powerful idea. There's two elements in Geula. There is what's called in Chassidus Geula Klalis and Geula Pratis in Tanya, Geras HaKodesh Siman Dalet. Or to put it differently, in another language, Lashon of Kabbalah, of Zoya and Chassidus, there's the Geula V'Sarusa de La'ela and there's the Geula V'Sarusa de L'Sata. Or to put it in very simple English, there's the Geula that Hashem brings. Only Hashem, nobody else. The creator of the world decides when Mashiach is going to come, how he's going to come, exactly what moment, in what fashion, or what style, as the Rambam says in Hilchos Malachim Perek Yud Beis. There's 13 things we're going to find out only when they happen. And nobody knows. Libe lepuma, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Libe lepuma loy galia. These are things that are not revealed to anybody. Ati Yedei Roza Yolam. Only you know the secrets of the world. Only the Rebbeinu Shalom himself, who runs the world and controls the world and orchestrates every event in the world, decides the moment of Geula, how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, exactly what fashion it's going to happen, under which circumstances it's going to happen. And we is l'shuascha kivinu, as we say in davening, l'shuascha kivinu, kol hayoim, or those who say animamen or think animamen, achakaloi, b'chol yoim sheyavoi. And as the Rebbe used to teach, and he once quoted, interestingly, the Rebbe quoted the Brisker Rav, the Velvel Brisker, Tavshin Mem Gimel or Mem Beis, a Haggadah came out before Pesach called Haggadah Shal Pesach Mi Beis Levi. It was a Brisker Haggadah, the Torah of the Beis HaLevi, Rabbi Yosheber, Rabbi Yosef Dov, and his son Reb Chaim Brisker, and his son Reb Velvel, the Brisker Rav. So I think Reb Pinchas Menachem Alter, who later became the Ger Rebbe, the Pnei Menachem was on Yechidus, and the Rebbe quoted this word from the Brisker Rav in the Haggadah. that when you say achakaloi b'chol yom sheyava, it doesn't mean achakaloi b'chol yom sheyava. In other words, every day I await that he's going to come. Achakaloi b'chol yom sheyava. The comma goes after achakaloi. I await his coming every day. That's one element of Geula. But there's another element of Geula. And the other element of Geula is what I create, what you create. It's the Geula we create in our own hearts. Or to put it differently, to quote again the Sefer Moir Einayim, another Talmud of the Maggid, Reb Nachum of Chernobyl, Parshas Chukas, this was a Moir Einayim that the Rebbe used to quote very often, that every single Jew has a nitzutz of Mashiach inside of him or her. In other words, there's Mashiach inside of me. I am Mashiach. You're Mashiach. I'm not a Melech Mebeis David, and I'm not a fine. Many of us are not from Zedek Beis David. We don't have the qualifications, but the spark, the nekuda of Mashiach exists in every single Jew. What Chassidus calls the Yechidah Shebenefesh. That state of Geula in every person. What's Mashiach? Mashiach is the person who introduces into the world oneness. Achdus Hashem, Einoid Malvade. Every person has that Yechidah Leyachdik, that point in you. That's the Mashiach inside of you. And the Moir Einayim says that that's the pshat. It says Dorach Koichav Miyakov. So Dorach Koichav Miyakov in Parshas Balak refers to Mashiach. Chazal also apply it to every single Jew, and the Rebbe says because both are the same. Because in every Jew there's a nitzutz of Mashiach based on the Moir Einayim. And when each person brings out that nitzutz, I bring out my spark, you bring out your spark. We all bring out our spark. It creates a fire. And that creates the Mashiach HaKlali, the collective energy that Mashiach brings into the world, that brings the Geula from above. And that moment, Hashem decides. But creating the ambiance, creating the atmosphere, living with it, introducing it into our own lives, as the Alter Rebbe says in Igeres HaKodesh, that every day you can create a Geula Pratis in your own life, that's already something that's completely dependent on my own awareness, on your own awareness, on our own awareness and courage and confidence. I think many of you probably remember this, or it's good to remember this, and that is that in the famous Sikha, Chav Ches Nissen Tov Nun Aleph, the Rebbe said that it was very shocking. He said that after everything he tried to do, it was all in vain because the Geula did not come. And the Jewish people did not go out of Galus. The mission was not accomplished. But then the Rebbe added these words. He said, "Va'od ve'iker." There's something even more painful. As I'm not saying this verbatim, but the Teuchin, you could hear it today. You could watch it, you can hear it, you can read it. Va'od ve'iker, as mis noch nicht reis von dem Galus pnei in inyane avodas Hashem v'chuli. Va'od ve'iker. Wow, what's the ve'iker? Va'od ve'iker. In other words, there was even a deeper pain. There's a galus pnimi. There's a collective galus that the whole world is in galus. Klal Yisrael is in galus. The Shechina is in galus, and history is in galus. And then there's a galus pnimi. There's that I'm in my own inner galus. B'inyane avodas Hashem v'chuli. And in a way, the Rebbe said that's the ikir pain. Why? I think we can understand. Because for so many years, we're trying to help ourselves and help the world, and help each person go out of the galus pnimi. But if I'm stuck in that, and there, Hashem says, Hakol b'dei shamayim chutz b'yer shamayim. That needs to stimulate me and challenge me. And that's the story of I think it's connected to the story of Reb Mendel Haradaka, that in his house, there was already a consciousness of Geula. He had to smell what's happening outside of his house, because the Chiddush of Geula is ultimately the whole world. This brings me to another point. The Rebbe said this, I think, Acharon Shel Pesach Tovshin Chaf Aleph, 1961, at the Fabrengen. How is it that suddenly one day the wolf is going to live with the lamb, the Gar Zevim Kevis? Whether you learn like the Rambam and Hilchos Malachim Perikid Beis that it's a mashal, it's a metaphor for the nations of the world, that there'll be full peace. Or Kipshutai, like many others say, that the wolf is going to live with the lamb. What happens suddenly? And the Rebbe said in Avoda that it starts off within a person. The world responds to people. Animals feel our energy, as we know. They sense it, Tzelem Elikim. The Zohar says, story with Daniel, it's brought in Tanya, Perek Chav Daled, I think. Animals sense the energy of people. Every person has a wolf and a lamb inside of them. there's a wolf inside of me, and there's a lamb inside of me. When a person can create the v'garza evim kevis within the person themselves, automatically the whole world changes. So much of the avoda of geula begins inside my heart, inside my brain, inside my soul, inside my home, inside my marriage, inside my connections with people, inside my daily life, and inside my psyche. What does this mean practically? I have 10 minutes. Okay, so let me try to do this in 10 minutes. So I think it means so many things practically, but I just want to bring out one point that may be very valuable. In the last months of Tafshin Nun Beis, after Chav Ches Nissen, the Rebbe kept on sharing an expression that I had the schus to hear myself with my own ears, and many of you heard it, or you have the schus to read it today or hear it today in the sichos, and that is medaf efen in the eigen. It's time to open our eyes. Nestaima avodas habirurim, the avoda of birurim. Birurim means the selecting, the choosing, the sifting through between good and evil has reached a conclusion. And today the avoda is to open your eyes and welcome the energy, Kabbalah's pnei Moshiach, welcome the energy, welcome the light of Gula, which is already present and manifested in the world. And as the Rebbe once expressed himself, I think it was Parshas Vayetze, Tafshin Nun Beis, that we're already Hakol Muchel, we're sitting at the table, there's the Levyasa, there's the Sher Habar, Hakol Muchel Lasud, everything is prepared for the meal. Umadaf Efen in the Eig, you have to open your eyes. I think the Rebbe told Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, Zechreinu Levracha, the Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel, at a Yechidus Tafshin Nun Beis, I think Vov Cheshvan Tafshin Nun Beis, he said an expression that I have said, he said that Moshiach is here, he's outside the door, we have to open the door, and I think he said, he spoke in Hebrew, L'schavata, which means pull him in. What does this mean? What does it mean to open my eyes? So I know this has been discussed so many times, and there's probably so many different ways of looking at it and so many different possibilities and dimensions to it. But I want to bring out just one little point that I think may also contribute to this vital conversation. What happens when my eyes are closed? If my eyes are closed, everything in the room is still the same. Nothing changes. When I open my eyes, I just get to perceive the reality. So it's not like when you close your eyes, the world changes. You know, kids, sometimes you close your eyes and you think nobody else sees you. Everybody sees me. I just don't see anybody else. So when we have closed eyes, we don't realize that somebody sees us because we don't see anybody. But everything is here. It's the ability to open your eyes, which is basically the ability to be perceptive, to open yourself up to seeing things that maybe moments ago when my eyes were closed, I could not see. So opening your eyes is not about changing reality. It's about seeing reality. Avodas habirurim is changing reality. What's birur? Like in Hilchas Boirid, in Hilchas Shabbos, in Shulchan Aruch Erechayim, was it Siman Shin Yotes? All the halachas of Boirid, the good and the bad are mixed. You know, the part of the salad that you want, the part of the salad that's rotten or moldy, it's mixed together. And you want to separate the desirable from the undesirable, the eichel from the psalus. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to do boirid. You're not allowed to be boirid psalus with eichel, because Shabbos, the focus is you see the good. During the weekdays, you have to be boirid. It's part of life. This is al pi nigla, al pi halacha, and it's al pi chsidus. Torah Parshas Lech Lecha, Torah Parshas B'Shalach, many Maimonim, Derech Mitzvasecha, Lo Yisavaru Eish. Shabbos, there's no boirid. Shabbos, you can eat the good. Derech Achilasa, you can take the good from the bad, but you're not busy with bad and good on Shabbos. Then there comes an era that Rebbe says, Nestaim Avodas Habirurim. Avodas Habirurim is changing reality, redefining reality. He says, today the Avodah is opening your eyes. It's being perceptive to reality. It's opening yourself up to reality. That's an intense idea. Think about it. That's an intense idea. Now, what would that mean practically in my life? And what does it even mean this time, Avodas Habirurim? There's no bad in me anymore. I don't have to struggle between good and bad. My good is not mixed with my bad. I mean, I can't talk about anybody else, but I can talk about myself. Really? Everything is borrowed, everything is clear, it's toiv and ra, completely two separate things. Wow. Which is why the Rebbe was surprised. Why is Moshiach not here? Why is it Al Pi? He said he did. I remember the Rebbe said Al Pi doesn't know a reason why Moshiach is not here. This is what Hashem wants, but he doesn't understand. Al Pi of Seichel, of Torah, he doesn't understand. Because, Golus is like pregnancy and Gula is like birth, and it's like overdue. Kolu kol hakitzin, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin Sadik Ches. But what does this look like? What does it mean to open my eyes? Perhaps one dimension is the way we look at ourselves, and therefore the way we look at our children, and therefore the way we look at our spouses. I should say first spouses, then children. Then the children. The way we look at our family, extended family, our community, our friends, our acquaintances, and the way we look at strangers, at anybody in the world. I have to open my eyes. And when you open your eyes, you'll see something else. Now, opening my eyes is not so easy, because for 45 years or 55 years, my eyes were closed. Not so easy to open my eyes, right? Opening your eyes may be a very, very serious transformation. But it really means that sometimes my entire gullus is based on my perception of who I am and who my child is and who the other person is. And then I just validate that perception through what we call confirmation bias, through behaviors that intensify that perception of reality, which is all based on the fact that my eyes are closed. What if we can open our eyes and see really Nistayim Avodas HaBerurim? Nistayim Avodas HaBerurim is that what we're calling the negativity in ourselves or the negativity in our children may have to be defined in much more subtle terms. And maybe one way of looking at it is as follows. The word ra, we usually translate as bad or evil or negative. And that's of course true. But in Tanya and Perek Vav, the Alter Rebbe quotes the pasuk in Koheles, Hevel u'ru'us ruach, ru'us. The etymology of the word ra is ru'us, which means brokenness, a broken spirit. Those of you who learned Masechta Baba Kama, Perek HaKoines, you remember, on the first Amid, Koisel ra'ua. What's ra'ua? Not a bad wall. Walls are not bad. It's a rickety wall. It's a shaky wall. It's a flimsy wall. It's not a wall that is anchored, that is solid. It's going to break. It's not going to last. What's the shoirish? What does Chassidus teach? What's the shoirish? What's the root of all ra? The root of ra is not evil. Later it becomes evil. In the ultimate source, where does ra begin? Ra begins in brokenness. In the notion that I'm separate. When something is broken, it's detached, it's fragmented, it's not part of the whole anymore. The truth is that every single one of us is part of a whole. Ein oid milvadai. Mala ha'aretz de'es Hashem kamayim le'yam mechasim is the organic state of reality where there's complete oneness. We are all part of formlessness. The beginning of Ra is when I decide that I'm a form, I'm a tziyur, I'm separate, I'm detached from the infinite, undefined wholeness of Ein Sof. And that sense of separateness, that sense of fragmentation, that sense of detachment, that is the shoirish of Ra. I think what we're seeing today more and more is when you look at people, especially you look at young people, we don't see bad anymore. I don't see bad people trying to become good people. I see broken people, Ra from brokenness, trying to become wholesome people. The Ra today is that you don't realize how beautiful you are. You don't realize how sacred you are. You don't realize how beautiful and sacred every child is. And it's difficult because we go back into that Gullah's program of duality, of separateness. I'm full of evil, I'm full of negativity. But it's time to open my eyes. The Rebbe loved saying over a word from the Moyer Einayim, Reb Nachum Shenobel. The last years he said it over, I think almost every year, Parshas Kedoshim. It says in the beginning of Kedoshim, Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokeich. Says the Medrash Rabbi, Yochel Kamoini. You think you could be as holy as I am? You think so? Talmud Loimar, Kedushas Kikadosh Ani, Kedushasi Lamayla Mekdushaschem. I'm holy. You're not holy. You're holy, but my holiness is higher than your holiness. Stam, there was the famous Rosh Yeshiva of Mir, Reb Chaim Shmulevich, Avoda Meid. So he once said, if you saw Reb Shloimke's villa, Reb Shloimke's villa was a Kaddish, a tzaddik in Yerushalayim. He says, if you saw Reb Shloimke's villa, you can understand why the Medrash thought Yachal Kamayni. You think you could be as holy as Hashem. If you saw him, you would understand the question of the Medrash. But it's a strange Medrash. You think you'll be as holy as God? So God says, no, you can't be as holy as me. So the Moirei Naim writes, Reb Nachum of Chernobyl, the Rebbe would say it over, the Tzemach Tzedek brings it. It's also brought in Degel Machane Ephraim, another grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. Chernobyl had a daughter, Adel, and Adel had a son. He wrote a sefer called Degel Machane Ephraim. So he writes the same word. Yachal Kamayni, the Rebbe used to say, Yachal Kamayni b'nichusa. It's not a question mark, it's an exclamation point. Yachal Kamayni, you could be like me. Yachal Kamayni b'nichusa. Talmud Loimar ki kadosh ani kedushas chilim kedushasi lamayla mikdushas. My holiness, Hashem says, comes from your kedusha, from your holiness, because we're completely one. My holiness, you create kivayachal Hashem's kedusha. That's what a person is. So we used to say, this is the pnei, this is what Chassidus says deep down. The Rebbe says, no, open your eyes. If I'm not seeing this in myself and in other people, my eyes are just completely blocked. It's a different vocabulary. It's a different attitude. The way you speak to a child, the way you speak to a bacher, the way you speak to a girl. It's not just the way you speak, it's the way you feel them, the way you experience them, so they can experience themselves. There's a beautiful word from the Heilige Yerushalayim. I'm going to finish with this because my time is up. The Heilige Yerushalayim says, Yochel Kamayni, Talmud Loimar ki Kadosh Ani. You would think you could be like me. So the Torah says, ki Kadosh Ani. I'm holy. So he says you have to read it differently. It's an unbelievable word. Yochel Kamayni. You think you could be like me? Tilmoid Loimar. Learn to say ki Kadosh Ani. Learn to say that I'm holy. Learn. Tilmoid Loimar ki Kadosh Ani. Learn to say it. I don't know if you know this, but I heard this from the Rebbe in Tov Nun Aleph at a Fabring in 1991, shortly after Chav Ches Nissen. I think it was Parshas Emor, the spring, summer, Nun Aleph. I don't remember now the week. I should look it up. And the Rebbe said then something. I heard it at the time. It was astounding. I asked a few people. I was a bacher, so I didn't. I heard that it was shocking. I asked a few people. But what should I say? The question was better than the answer. The Rebbe said that v'amech kulam tzaddik, every Jew is a tzaddik, even the tzaddik that's discussed in Tanya. It says in the Tanya that not every person could be a tzaddik. So the Rebbe said that was before the Holocaust. And the words of the Rebbe is, das is given far the gzeides v'hashmadas von der Achim. The Rebbe used to call the Holocaust the gzeides v'hashmadas of the last generation. After what the Jewish people went through, everything is different. What does this mean? So this you could bring on for a few days and for a few weeks and for a few months and for a few years. Ad zebula basraisa you could bring about this. But one nekuda, the whole way of looking at ourselves and looking at other people today must be through the lenses of Geula, through the lenses of Moshiach. Not to see Ra. The real Ra that exists in people is their feeling that they have Ra. That's the Ra. The feeling that they're broken, that they're separate, that they're disconnected, that they're detached. When the emes of emes is that every single Jew is a manifestation of Atzmus Ein Sof Baruch Hu in this world. And if I'm not seeing that in me and I'm not seeing that in you, I get it. My eyes are closed. So with compassion, I have to be able to talk to my eyes and help myself open my eyes. Now, sometimes it's difficult because I'm programmed for so many years. And I come back to the Milsad of Dichasa. Yeah, Mashiach is da. Aber the Hint glauben nicht an Moshiach. The dogs don't believe in Mashiach. Which dogs are these? Hani kalbin dachatzifin. There's voices inside of me that schlep me away from the truth of who I am, from the truth of who you are, from the truth of that consciousness of absolute oneness with Atzmos Ein Sof Baruch Hu. That is the true reality of every single Jew and ultimately of every person and ultimately of the whole world. To live in that consciousness is a choice that I make every single day and every single moment. Who am I? Who is the person I'm breathing into? Who is the person I'm experiencing? Who is the person that is communicating right now with myself, with my spouse, with my children, with anybody in the world? Who is that person? Is that a person who is a conduit for absolute infinity? Or is that a person who's wounded and bruised and evil and bad and detached and depressed and despondent and anxious with all of my challenges and wounds?